Speakers can seamlessly transition through and say their piece. We have 90 minutes. We will be keeping track of the timing. Each speaker, both pro and a floor, will have 2 minutes. Right here next to me, Jason will hold up a green sign that says 30 seconds and a red sign that says 15 seconds. I will keep strict time on the 2 minutes so that everybody gets a chance to speak. So with that, I'd like to recognize the first speaker.
Good evening. My name is Alan Ostergren. I'm President and Chief Counsel of the Kirkwood Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan law firm working on public interest issues here in Des Moines. The last time I sat in this chair was to testify on the voter ID bill in 2017 and heard a number of comments about how that was going to be the end of democracy in Iowa. We've had 2 very successful elections since that time. Frankly, the top line headline for what I'm here to say is that a lot of the rhetoric about election security measures is overblown and name calling and doesn't advance the substance of the debate. There's room for positive debate about what our laws should be to improve the electoral process, and we should have one of those tonight and throughout this process. This bill addresses some needed reforms toward how Iowa County auditors administer elections, and it emphasizes the importance of administering elections in a neutral and even-handed manner. We had a regrettable experience in the last election cycle where 3 county auditors did not do that and had to be stopped by Iowa courts. And I want to emphasize that every Iowa judge, every single Iowa judge who heard those cases came to the same conclusion, that those auditors had overstepped their bounds and needed to be ordered to obey the law. Well, it shouldn't take political campaigns and a candidate going to court to make Iowa public officials obey the law. They should do it on their own. And this bill has needed improvements to make that happen. It's also not voter suppression. That's name calling, it's not substance. No one ever defines what that term means. It just means that somebody's upset and opposed to something. It's not a constructive comment to call something voter suppression. This certainly is not it. It protects the right to vote and ensures neutrality in the process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all the members of the committee for the time allotted here tonight.
My name is Emily Silliman. I have been interested in voting since high school when I had a summer job at the Linn County Auditor's Office. When I went abroad to study Russian, I became the first person in Linn County history to vote absentee from the Soviet Union. I remember being so proud of our democratic system and Iowa's tradition of free, fair, and open elections. Iowa led the nation in making it easier to register and providing more opportunities to vote. In this most recent election, I was a poll observer at early voting sites all over eastern Iowa. I saw how counties with Republican auditors and counties with Democratic auditors conducted their elections, and I was impressed by how professional and fair the process was. I'm concerned about the provision in particular, the provision at the top of page 15, which in effect threatens county auditors and ordinary poll workers with fines and jail time for merely asking a disruptive observer to stop interfering with the process. This opens the door for armed thugs and people from outside the state to intimidate voters on election day and intimidate auditor's office staff while they count absentee ballots. I witnessed a serious attempt to shut down the process. I have witnessed one such attempt. One could say, just strike that one bad provision out of this bill and move on, but it isn't that simple. This bill is riddled with one provision after another that makes it harder for Iowans to exercise the right to vote. From criminalizing an offer to help deliver another person's ballot, to making it twice as difficult to get enough signatures to run for office. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Andy Conlon, and I am here on behalf of the Opportunity Solutions Project, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan group that offers policy solutions to federal and state leaders. We are registered in support of this bill and just want to make a couple of brief remarks to outline why that is. Like everybody else in this room, we believe that every voter should have the opportunity to cast their ballot. We think there's a natural tension that happens with policymakers all over the country as they explore opportunities to expand access versus ensure security of our elections. We think this bill strikes the right balance, and we appreciate Chairman Coffin and Senator Smith's work on this effort. We believe the most important parts of this bill are the ones that make sure that elections are administered uniformly across the state. Iowans in Denison should know that elections that are happening in Iowa City are happening in exactly the same way as they are in their town, and vice versa. This is extremely important. Every Iowan should should be voting by the same rules, and ultimately that's a critical piece for Iowans' faith in the elections. Just a couple of things that I just want to highlight briefly. I know that we're a little bit short on time. First of all, we think that the provisions around drop boxes make a lot of sense. I think the market has told us that people are interested in drop boxes, but we need to make sure that they are secure. And we think the provisions in this bill do that, and we think the provisions related to that have been discussed at the subcommittee level about potentially creating a formula for expanding that makes sense as well. We also believe that the voter roll maintenance procedures will ensure that voters' registrations are up to date and that only those who are able to vote can. We think it makes an awful lot of sense and will reduce the burden on poll workers and counties on the back end. So with that, Mr. Chair, committee members, we appreciate your time this evening. We know you have a long night ahead of you. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions at a later date.
Thank you.
Carolyn Klaus. I am an active member of the Ames League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County. Since retiring 11 years ago, I have worked to educate and register eligible voters in Story County. I work directly with the county auditor, and in every election, there are changes. The league educates and registers voters on the rules of each election. The rules change in regard to new requirements, time changes, and much more in every election. A teacher in Iowa high schools teaches a first-time voter the laws and guidelines for voting, and by the time they vote, the laws have changed. Story County has a larger channel of dealing with students from other states. They can choose to vote in Iowa as a student. We encourage early registration for students, but the truth is, if they can register and vote on the same day, that is what they will choose. Iowa State greets a new freshman class of over 5,000 first-time voters, age 18, every year. By registering early, they are encouraged to become educated on the candidates. Informing voters on how to vote is a challenge. What worked yesterday is out of date tomorrow. I've been a poll worker for many elections. We set up our locations the night before as best we can without breaching security requirements. At 6 a.m. on election day, we complete our setup for opening at 7 a.m. There is usually a line waiting to get in to vote. What we don't want is a long line when it is time to close voting. It has been a long day at that point. All early voting possibilities serve to keep the line short and moving forward. 76% of eligible Iowans voted in the 2020 election. That is a great turnout, and it was not an accident. County auditors worked hard by conducting satellite voting. Walk in the shoes of a county auditor and a poll worker. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for speaking.
Mhm.
Thank you. Hello. Hey, so I had no idea that this would be like it is right now. I wrote my comments when I signed up to speak. Did you all see those, or I don't want to repeat what I have already said. I had no idea that I would be alone sitting here speaking to you. I sat in my office for over 4 hours yesterday and read every page of this. And I made some notes. So basically what I would like to say is that I do have a few questions about why there are changes with nominees and signatures. I don't know why those are changing. But as far as everything else, in a nutshell, it looks to me like there are processes. We have processes and laws, and they need to be followed. You can't have someone doing home rule powers saying that, well, we're going to change it. Processes need to be followed. And in my opinion, it seems like you have the Secretary of State who has certain powers, and it's their responsibility to remind and ensure that the county and the commissioners and anyone who's running elections does their job and is reminded of their job and what they can and cannot do. So that's kind of what I see this, but I don't see it as voter suppression at all. I see it as ensuring the processes are followed. Just because Iowa had very little voter fraud or ever has, people seem to forget that, I can't see that.
You have 30 seconds left.
That people seem to forget that we've never done mail-in ballot as a nation. This is absolutely ridiculous. I feel like elections are turning into whoever can collect the most ballots.
15 seconds.
Whoever can collect the most ballots to win. I remember when election day was a day, I was proud. I went in. I would have done anything to vote. And I don't think that a little inconvenience by proving my ID, where I live, is too much. And that is not voter suppression. So I'm for this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Hello, my name is Deidre Desjare. I live in Polk County, Iowa. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Those are the words embedded on our state seal and our motto. Iowa has a long, rich history of being on the front lines of social justice and racial justice and voting justice. We were among the first states to legalize same-sex marriage. Iowa was one of the first states to desegregate schools, nearly 100 years before Brown versus Board of Education, and nearly 100 yards from us is a monument that symbolizes the importance of freedom in the chaos of Ralph. Iowa has a rich history of standing up on behalf of all people. In this past election, more than 1.7 million people 1.7 million people participated in our elections process. Nearly 1.7 million people. I didn't say Republicans, I didn't say Democrats, I said people. People who wanted to use their voice via the ballot box. Those people were exercising their rights. Those people were in action, showing us what democracy looks like. It is our duty and our honor to honor the legacy of those folks who came before us, those Iowans who were a part of the rich history, our ancestors who fought for desegregation, our ancestors who fought for voting rights, who ushered in progress for each and every one of us to be here in this moment as we speak. In the first election in this country, only white male landowners could vote. Look at how far we've come. Let us not restrict democracy, but allow democracy to simply exist. And this bill does not do that. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain.
Thank you.
This bill does not do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Janice Weiner. During my 26 years as a U.S. diplomat, I served places where people literally risked their lives to vote. When I spoke with them, I held up my home state as a shining example of making it easy to exercise the franchise. I was an overseas absentee voter. After 9/11, our mail was cut off for weeks because of anthrax. Things happen. Ballots are spoiled or need to be cured. Auditors need time to react. I've helped people in assisted living by turning their signed sealed ballots into the auditor's office. They had no one else to do it. As a poll worker, I participated in a nonpartisan effort to ensure that all eligible voters could vote. There is no reason to usurp local control and threaten local election officials who dedicate their lives to helping people vote. In the midst of a pandemic, Iowans voted in record numbers. 75.77% of those eligible voted. That's awesome. Secretary of State Pate congratulated us. Our aim should be to overtake Minnesota, where nearly 80% of eligible voters voted, not roll things back. Shortening the absentee window will disadvantage shut-ins, snowbirds, domestic violence victims, the elderly, many in rural areas, and more. And taking people off the voter rolls for missing one general election is unconscionable. Yesterday would have been John Lewis's 81st birthday. His life's work centered on ensuring that people had the right to vote. and the freedom to vote. We in Iowa have the freedom to vote. It's a cornerstone of our democracy. Our laws are not broken. There was no fraud. You are public servants who serve all Iowans. Just as Senator Ernst won her election and each of you won yours, President Biden won freely and fairly. The remedy for the big lie of a stolen election is not to take an axe to election laws that work exceedingly well. It's simply to tell the truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Russell. Very few things are more fundamental to the success of this country and of this state than our elections, which is why election misconduct is a very serious matter, and it only makes sense that our laws should reflect that. It should be exceptionally difficult for anyone to cheat, and I cannot fathom why that is a controversial opinion in a state like Iowa, where we are often admired for our values. We need to face the reality that after recent events surrounding the 2020 election, many Americans do not have faith in our elections. This should concern all of you because it affects all of us. If we don't start taking steps to increase public confidence in the integrity of our elections now, all of us will continue to live in a divided society. I've seen a lot of people throw around the words voter suppression when none of these provisions are an obstacle to someone voting, and similar provisions exist in other states. The timeframes for voting are still very feasible. Even though I'm a law student, it doesn't take a law student to realize that county elected officials need to be stopped from ignoring election laws, which is something that this bill sets out to accomplish by establishing penalties for this type of misconduct. This bill also eliminates ballot harvesting, giving me peace of mind. As someone who has dealt with various political organizations over the years, the concept of ballot harvesting is very unsettling to me. Political parties, campaigns, and special interest groups should never be trusted to collect and return a voter's ballot. If that doesn't raise red flags in your head, then you aren't paying attention to the state of our current political climate. This bill would eliminate ballot harvesting, as I said, which gives me peace of mind because I know firsthand what special interest groups are capable of doing in order to get the result they seek, and many of them do not care how they get there, just as long as they do get there. So I'm in support of this bill.
Thank you.
Joe Henry with the League of United Latin American Citizens. We oppose this bill in its entirety. 65,000 Latinos voted in Iowa in 2020. 90,000 in our community are eligible. 30% of the Latino community in Iowa who are registered to vote are under the age of 30, many of which voted for the first time last year. We need people outside of the family unit to also work as volunteers to help our people register to vote and do absentee ballot requests. Because of the English-only law, we have a number of families who do not understand English as a primary language. So we need help from volunteers. Early voting, the request for a mail-in ballot needs to say where it's at. We can't go less than that. It takes time, especially with young voters. When we look at the amount of registered voters in our community, actually over half are under the age of 40. So we have a very young community. The absentee ballot request is also important in also many other different ways because our young people, many of which do not have their own transportation, rely on public transportation. Our elderly also need transportation, which they do not have. So having that extra time to vote early is very important, and to have volunteers to help them with that. Also to interpret the information that is on the ballot request is very important. So again, we oppose this bill in its entirety. We urge you to not support it, to please move forward and allow things to stay the way they are. We are a growing community here in Iowa, and we will continue to be the lifeblood of Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Smith. I'm with the Association of Mature American Citizens, and I'm here to support this bill because it puts accountability into law. For example, voter registration maintenance is a requirement. It should be, it should have always been. Why it isn't? Don't ask. I have no question. The idea that in current law, you can register and request an absentee ballot at 120 days. That's 4 months, folks, over 4 months. there are going to be people who die between that time and the actual ballot. Should they be counted? No, because they're not alive to vote at the time of the election. As it is, the bill calls for 70 days. That's still 2.5 months. It's plenty of time. Our form of government is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. We're supposed to work at being responsible citizens. Just as the ballots can be mailed in today more than 18 days ahead of the actual election. That makes no sense. If 18 days isn't enough, doesn't that mean that we have problems with our postal system, not our election system? Finally, there were 3 bills or 3 lawsuits that said that auditors were in error in actions that they took. Wouldn't we want to correct those laws? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Cindy Golding from Lynn County, and I'm here to address a couple of issues about this bill. Number one, I live out on a farm. We get mail for our neighbors. Neighbors get mail for us. Last week, I got somebody's bank statement. 3 weeks ago, I got somebody's credit card bill. We count on each other to give it back to us, we hope. When we got those filled in absentee ballot request forms, they were filled in with our names, our birth dates, our PIN numbers from our voter ID card, and all you had to do was sign it and mail it back. And then all that they would do at the auditor's office is look at the signature on the request form to the signature on the ballot without having any idea if it was the voter that actually filled that out. And knowing the problems that we have with our regular mail, there's so much that we do that we have to be careful of because our mail goes in other people's boxes and we get theirs. So for voting, the fact that an auditor would take it upon himself to mail out pre-filled out registration forms is unconscionable. I was shocked. That's number one. Number two is the ballot harvesting. A few years back, I was a candidate, and I had some little old ladies talk to me about they had people pick up their ballots that, it was from their son's union, and they were told they filled it out wrong, and they really wanted to vote for me, but the guy told me she filled it out wrong and threw it away. So that's number two. And then the third one is same-day registration. You shouldn't be able to use a cell phone bill as proof of residency. It's not tied to a property like a water bill or a gas
That
bill.
concludes your comments. Thank you very much.
Anthony Carroll for ARP Iowa. We oppose this bill in current form, even though we acknowledge the good points like adding a mark instead of signature. Thank you. I'll frame my concerns not as the sky is falling, but please consider modifying. Please consider modifying, shortening Iowa's early voting period. Older Iowans across the political spectrum like to vote early. According to the absentee ballot reports we get from the Secretary of State, as of September 18th, 45 days prior to election, over 500,000 requests statewide. 71% of those requests were over the age of 50. Any ballot requests 45 days out. Older Iowans vote early, and some snowbirds fly south sooner than others. Please consider modifying provisions related to Iowa's election officials sending absentee requests. Our ANSEL survey found in the summer 69% approved the Secretary of State mailing absentee requests. I appreciate the subcommittee discussion on being allowed to auditors follow up for people that don't have printers at home. Thank you. Please consider modifying who can return ballots. Thank you for including caregivers, finding a way to include people that you trust. Appreciate. Finally, please consider allowing auditors to retain the option to tap into their local experience and add things like senior centers, other areas that are high traffic areas for older voters. Thank you for listening. Whatever you pass, know ARP will stand by to do outreach and education like we did in 17, 18. In 2019, I think we're the only organization that did Democrat and Republican caucus training, and certainly 2020. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We got the right button pushed here. All right. My name is Gary Leffler. I'm from Polk County, Iowa. Most of you know me as the tractor guy. We go to all of the, we try to attend all our veterans events. We try to go to all of our Blue Line Matters. And folks, we're here today that when I go someplace and I see how people treat our election system, it makes me curl back just a little bit. We have men and women that served our country. They gave their lives so that we'd have honest and forthright elections. And that's what we're here to maintain today. You know, the time that people have to vote, it's precious, but every person should honor the people that gave their lives so that they take the proper time that they have to vote. I talked to one of our senior senators, staff members, and they said this: if we do not maintain the integrity of our elections, we don't have anything. So I can speak in support of this bill because that's what you folks are trying to do here. You're trying to maintain election integrity, and that's what the people of Iowa want, and that's what you're giving them. And I say thank you to you folks for doing that. The one thing I still feel, and we are a little bit afraid, I was at the Capitol on January 6th. What people are a little bit concerned about is this: voter integrity. The Dominion machines. I didn't see anywhere in this bill where it specifically approached that. And I would like to see you maybe have some of the language and take a look at that and talk about these Dominion machines. Because right now you've got half of the people that voted in a national election that are feeling like yesterday's newspaper in the bottom of a bird cage. And they're trying to figure out, how in the world did this happen? So you must restore integrity back into our voting. I think this bill goes a long way to getting that done, but don't confuse the end for the beginning or the beginning for the end. This is just part of the process. Continue to keep up the good work. Thank you for what you guys have done.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Linda Sarah Hagedorn. I live in Ames, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County. And I'm here to represent the League of Women Voters of Iowa. We are against this bill. The core mission of the League of Women Voters is to fight voter suppression and to promote voting for all citizens. There are many aspects of this bill that are troubling, but I have chosen to highlight just one, and that's on absentee ballots. Please do not tie the hands of our state auditors and disallow them to send out absentee ballots to registered voters. To ask a voter to pick up an in-person ballot negates the reasons people need absentee ballots. We're a rural state. Voting is never convenient, but it's almost impossible for the homebound, the sick, and those who don't have transportation. And if we don't have transportation to a polling place, how would we have transportation to go pick up a ballot? To require that a request for absentee ballot be printed from the internet is like asking if people are hungry, why don't they just eat cake? Many people lack the resources to do this. You need a computer, a printer, and an internet connection. Many people in our state do not have access to the internet. Most people will access the internet from their phones. It may be the 21st century, but not everyone has the luxury of these resources. Not only does the bill restrict the acquisition of absentee ballots, it also decreases the number of days that they can be requested. Under this bill, we'd only have 70 days before an election to request a ballot, reduced from the 120 days under the current law. So let's look at this. Individuals wanting an absentee ballot have less time to work through the new red tape to get one. These restrictions on absentee ballots affect the most vulnerable and those whose rights are being ignored. We are a country and a state that is currently looking deeply at ourselves and our service from an equity viewpoint.
Ma'am, that concludes your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Laura Hesberg. I'm with the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we urge you to oppose this bill. We believe this bill is unnecessary. We do not have a voter integrity problem in Iowa, and it will make it harder for Iowans to vote, especially those who rely on early voting because they have significant barriers to voting in person on election day. I'm going to focus my remarks on domestic violence, but we don't think it's good to undermine the voting rights of anyone. Domestic violence is a major barrier to voting. Consider voting is the ultimate form of power, and stripping power away from someone is what domestic violence is all about. And preventing a partner from voting independently is a common form of emotional abuse. Many victims are highly motivated to vote because it's the one area in their life they can control. Safety concerns mean they're always on guard, strategically thinking about how to do any number of things we all take for granted, like voting. Early voting is a lifeline of autonomy for victims of abuse. Many survivors who are still living with the person avoid voting on election day because they want to vote independently. And for those who have already fled an abusive relationship, it is simply unsafe to vote on election day. For some, the satellite voting site near their home or the ballot drop box near their grocery store is their only option. This bill undermines both of those. Some rely on a trusted friend to drop off their ballot because they cannot trust their family member. This bill takes that away. For survivors enrolled in Iowa's Safe at Home address confidentiality program, the 18-day window most likely disenfranchises them entirely. This program provides victims of violence a substitute address they can use to prevent them from their address appearing in public records. They don't enroll in the program lightly. People who do this, if there's a trade-off, and they do it because they fear for their life and safety. It's administered by the Secretary of State's office, and they do an awesome job. But in practice, Safe at Home participants already have a shorter vote by mail window compared to other voters because of the process it takes to protect their address. The 18-day window would almost make this physically impossible for them to return and get a ballot. There's lots of
That concludes
trade-offs.
your time, ma'am.
Enrolling in this program, losing the right to vote should not be one of them.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. My name's Amy Campbell, and I represent the League of Women Voters and area agencies on aging, both of whom are registered in opposition to this bill. We currently believe the way the bill is currently written will limit the voting options of older Iowans, Iowans with disabilities, Iowans with chronic health conditions, Iowans working multiple jobs, and Iowans without reliable transportation. Specifically, the bill does not allow the voter to call the auditor and ask for an absentee ballot request form to be sent to them. Not all Iowans have printers and have the ability to go to the county seat to request an absentee ballot request form. In addition, Section 52 prohibits anyone from other than the person's caregiver or family member or member of the household to deliver a voted absentee ballot. Not all older Iowans have family members in town or even in the state, and they may be living independently without any caregiver. Iowans rely on neighbors, friends, members of their church to help fill in for family. This is particularly important, as Laura just said, if there is a family dynamic that is less than ideal. A friend may be the only person that a person trusts to deliver that ballot. The shortening of the early voting period is of concern to 18 days. Postal delays, extended trips that retired people may take, and time to cure simple mistakes like a signature could interfere with a person's right to vote. We don't think that families who make honest mistakes and are sometimes rushed to not have that opportunity to have their vote count. I know that you were planning on addressing the barcode with those with overseas ballots, and I appreciate that. I would hope that we continue to utilize that barcode, as that is a uniform way of determining when it enters the ballot. Thank you for your time. I know that this is a difficult issue, but we hope that you can find some ways to address these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Woodbury County Auditor Pat Gill. Thank you for this opportunity. Representative Kaufman, Representative Masher, Representative Jacobson. Election integrity in Iowa faces two serious threats, one internal and one external. The internal threat is a fractured partnership between the Secretary of State and the county auditors of Iowa. The proposed legislation only promises to make it much worse. The legislation will pit county auditors against the Secretary of State by placing the Secretary in a position of being the judge and jury over county auditors, and put auditors in a predicament where the choice is not to report an error that is discovered in their office or to report the error and risk being accused of committing a felony. In Woodbury County, it appears that 7 voters voted twice. I discovered the error while investigating the external threat and reported it to Secretary of State's office because I want to correct it from prevent it from happening again. I was willing to risk receiving a letter of technical infraction in order to prevent it from happening again. In the future, auditors who are put in the same position may face a vindictive secretary, regardless of party affiliation, and must make a very unpleasant choice that places them in harm's way. The second threat is external. It is the verification process for these folks who choose to vote by mail. In the 2020 general election, we had a case where 2 voters called to inform us they had not voted the ballots and that we received for them. The ballots we received had affidavit envelopes that were signed by the same person, but clearly not the voters who had requested them. The proposed legislation does nothing to prevent this from happening. We also have evidence of ballot harvesting that took place during the 2020 primary election. We have upwards of 60 ballots that were cast in the Republican primary that appeared to have been cast by the same person on behalf of other voters. The proposed legislation does nothing to prevent this from happening. I urge you to meet with county auditors and the Secretary of State's office before proceeding with this legislation and develop something that does make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Masher, for this public hearing tonight. My name is Ryan Doctor. I'm the current president of the Iowa State Association of County Auditors and the Sioux County Auditor. My fellow county auditors and I have identified several areas of concern regarding House File 590, and I will speak to 3 of those concerns this evening. First, regarding satellite voting. The bill, by taking away the auditor's ability to set up satellite voting stations at their discretion, is a great hardship. Consequently, voters would have to petition for all satellite locations rather than the auditor determining the best location so as to not waste time and money on minimally used locations. The effect of this bill may mean an increase in absentee voting at the courthouse or by mail or on election day, putting greater strain on election workers. I believe is the last thing any of us want is for people to think that voting is too hard or not convenient by limiting the options to vote. Next, giving the Secretary of State broad authority regarding elections may give that position too much power. Iowa code already dictates how elections are to be conducted, but giving any further power to the position may have unintended consequences. The bill states that the State Commissioner of Elections shall prescribe uniform election procedures. Uniformity in elections is good, but what is also good is how each county might do something slightly different than another county. Not doing that procedure wrong, just differently, also brings more integrity to elections. If someone wants to interfere with elections, then they'll know to be successful in every county, not just a few with complete uniformity. Finally, local control is very important for many different issues in county government, and elections are no different. County auditors see firsthand what the unique needs are for their citizens whom they represent. County home rule for elections should not be changed. Iowa has a long track record of conducting clean and fair elections, so rather than inhibiting our county auditors in their important work, let's empower them in their roles as public servants on behalf of Iowans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kaufman and Ranking Member Masher, for this opportunity to address House File 590. I'm Rhonda Dieters, Grundy County Auditor and past president of ISACA. This bill imposes fines of up to $10,000 and the possibility of being suspended from office for up to 2 years in the event an auditor is issued a technical infraction. Such penalties are unnecessary and an undue burden for county auditors. County auditors perform many duties, preparing the county's budget, calculating real estate taxes, clerk to the Board of Supervisors, to name a few. And to fine or suspend an auditor for a technical infraction of an election law with no showing of malice or intent to break the law is unreasonable and puts all of the duties and responsibilities of the county auditor on the shoulders of others who are not held accountable through the election process. County auditors are already held to a high level of accountability to their constituents by the electoral process and the possibility of removal from office as is currently provided in the Code of Iowa. To grant authority to the Secretary of State to remove a county auditor who has been duly elected by the people in his or her county is to put every county auditor in a subservient position to a state official. No other county elected official is subject to the threat of removal by a state official in the same manner. This bill, if passed, would have a chilling effect on county election officials, not just the county auditor, but poll workers as well. County auditors are finding it more and more difficult to recruit citizens to act as poll workers, and this bill would further hamper our efforts to do so. to subject county auditors and poll workers who have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and to faithfully and impartially, to the best of our abilities, discharge the duties of our office to penalties beyond that are already available in the Code of Iowa is redundant and excessive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kaufman and Ranking Member Masher, for convening this public hearing and addressing House File 590. I am Becky Bissell, the Adams County Auditor, and I'm also a Republican. I would like clarification on who can send out an absentee ballot request form. Currently, it states auditors can't send them out. However, your colleague, Senator Tom Shipley, his 91-year-old mother, Emma Shipley, participates in every election by calling me up and requesting that form. She would not be able to do that. Another voter is a 93-year-old who relies on church members to help her through the voting process. Your bill will not allow those members to help her return her ballot to me. Smaller rural counties have a large elderly population who typically choose to vote absentee because of weather or health concerns. Why are we making it harder for them to vote? An 18-day window for absentee voting compresses the turnaround time for mail-in voting. The Postal Service is not adequate nor reliable in handling mailed ballots, even those with intelligent mail barcodes. It takes on average 5 days to mail something from Corning, where I'm from, and have it returned. This bill removes our ability to use postmarks. Our ballots go to Des Moines to be scanned, and by the time they get there, it's after midnight. Therefore, it would not meet the deadline for the barcode. To make sure that all of our legally mailed ballots were counted, my postmaster and I agreed that he would hand stamp every single one that came out on November 2nd. And again, when it got up to Des Moines and was scanned after midnight, I wouldn't have been able to count it. But because we did, we were able to count. To rely solely on the postal system puts our voters at risk. Chairman Kaufman, you stated that you hope a bipartisan bill can be reached and put together that all Iowans can be proud of. Auditors are eager and willing to work with both chambers on topics in which you have concerns about, since we all want the exact same thing: easy to vote, but hard to cheat. Every auditor across the state works tirelessly to host elections that Iowans can be proud of. And I think in 2020, we overwhelmingly proved that was the case. I urge you to reach out to me, reach out to your own county auditor, reach out to our association, and we will all work together to make Iowa a strong leader in the voting process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the 2 minutes to air my grievances. My name is Dr. Brian Jackholder of Council Bluffs. I'm a lifelong resident of Pot County and a 4-time candidate for Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. I speak here today for all the little people in opposition to this purported election bill, which is merely tyranny by another name. The right to petition the government for a redress of grievances by running for public office, as all of you have done, is the foundation stone of our constitutional and democratic republic. We, the people, no longer have representative government nor free and fair elections when independent and third-party candidates are punished with undue burdens and arbitrary and capricious standards to secure ballot access. This bill, which increases the threshold to run for public office, is absolutely ridiculous and completely unnecessary. This bill treats libertarians and independents as second-class citizens by forcing us to meet ballot access requirements similar to the two-party tyranny candidates, while at the same time denying us a primary election, all in violation of the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Iowa. Furthermore, this bill increases the threshold for libertarians and independents to nominate candidates at a convention in violation of equal protection. Finally, this bill violates the Iowa Constitution, Article 3, Section 29, which explicitly states that every act shall embrace but one subject and matters properly connected therewith. This bill covers a multitude of subjects that have nothing to do with each other. Absentee ballots and voting periods have nothing to do with circulating nomination petitions to run for public office. The issue of ballot access was not expressed in the title in violation of Section 29. For these reasons, I oppose this bill, and it should be rejected and voted. And should you pass this, libertarians will have no other option but to run against each and every one of you in the primary and general elections, because it's not fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, representatives. I want to thank you for your time for allowing me to comment on House File 590. My name is Bill Collestead, and I'm the Public Policy Manager at the Iowa Developmental Disability Council. The council advocates for flexibility and simplicity in the laws that allow Iowans with disabilities a chance to vote. If the bill passes, this legislation will narrow the voting times. It will limit who can provide and need assistance in casting a vote and it limits placement and availability of ballot boxes, thus making voting more difficult for people with disabilities. These changes may seem very small to many, but from our perspective, they create excessive obstacles for people with disabilities to share their voice and cast a vote. We see the ability to ask for help and rely on natural supports as a hallmark of a great self-advocate. We know that people with disabilities are voting more than ever, and we strongly feel this bill should be addressing more accessible ways one can exercise their vote rather than limitations. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kyle Koya from Polk County, Iowa here. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am here as one of the millions of Iowans that are concerned about the impact this bill will have on our everyday life. I think this bill should be struck down, along with many other Iowans, as we've heard spoken through tonight. I think at best, this bill makes it needlessly more difficult for Iowans to vote, and at its worst, suppress the votes of millions of Iowans. Shortening the time for early voting and absentee voting, as proposed in this bill, will lead to needlessly longer lines on election day. If we think about the news reports in other states where people are in line for hours, we shouldn't strive for that. That's not what I think Iowa needs to be. But unfortunately, this bill pushes us in that direction where we get to be on the news talking about hour-long lines to vote. Just over 4 years ago, Iowans had 40 days prior to the election to receive an absentee ballot and vote. This bill would reduce that all the way down to 18 days, which is barely enough time for the auditors to mail out the ballot, the voter to receive them, and then for the voter to return it back to the auditors, especially given postal service delays that we've spoken about that this bill does not address. Couple that with limiting the number of drop boxes and banning satellite voting locations, and Iowans throughout the state will see their ability to have their voices heard severely limited. Those pushing this bill say it's necessary to secure our elections, but there hasn't been any voter fraud in Iowa. There really hasn't been any voter fraud elsewhere. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I hope you all remember to vote no.
Thank you.
My name is John Olson. I'm from Ankeny, Iowa. I'm gravely concerned about the future of the right to vote in Iowa because many in the Iowa legislature believe that the answer to making elections more secure and honest is to make it more difficult for Iowans to participate in our democracy. The end result of HF 590 will be fewer people voting and having their voice in our democracy denied. Can you say you represent constituents when you have deprived them of their vote? I strongly urge you to vote no on HF 590. The bill disenfranchises many Iowans. According to information from ncsl.org, 36.6 is the average number of days that states mail out absentee ballots prior to election day, not 18. There are no states that currently require ballots to be received prior to election day. If this bill, along with SF 115, which requires ballots to be mailed no later than 10 days before the election, both become law, then Iowa voters will have a maximum of 8 days to receive, fill out, and mail back their ballots. This will disenfranchise many snowbirds, elderly, armed force members, Iowans with disabilities, college students, and business people out of town on election day. The bill fails to proactively identify and register to vote previously ineligible voters. An amendment to this bill should be added that requires the state registrar to create a program that identifies previously ineligible voters who have had their right to vote restored last year by Governor Reynolds' executive order and send them a letter notifying them of this change and include a voter registration form. Virtually every provision in this bill creates barriers to voting or the administration of elections more challenging. This bill makes a mockery of the Iowa state motto, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Please vote no on HF 590. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Sorry. My name is Jennifer Irwin. I am here in opposition to House File 590. I think the entire thing should be scrapped. It was very difficult to find even 2 minutes to talk about because it should all be scrapped. An earlier commenter spoke about the men and women who gave their lives for our right to vote, and oh, shouldn't we keep it safe? Newsflash, most of those men and women voted by mail while serving our country and ensuring our right to vote. Our U.S. veterans know, trust, and need voting by mail to participate in our elections. They are not worried about voting by mail. The only people worried about voting by mail are people who are upset that our current president was elected and people who are upset that he was elected by people who voted by mail. We all see what this is. You are not hiding. It's embarrassing. Making people pick up an absentee ballot request kind of negates the purpose of an absentee ballot request. That's stupid. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We will probably still be dealing with the pandemic at our next election. We need more time and space to do everything in a pandemic, voting included. Time and space which you are stripping away. We will absolutely be on the news for all the wrong reasons. We will have lines out the door until midnight on election night because you guys want to restrict time and space for voting. It's rude. You should be embarrassed. This bill should be struck. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Gina Newell. My husband and I have been residents of Des Moines for the past 31 years. It's an honor for me to have this opportunity to speak with you today about election integrity in Iowa. As a member of a family with a strong heritage of military and civic service, it has been profoundly ingrained in me that as citizens of this exceptional country, we are obligated to be an informed electorate who understands that our vote is sacrosanct to our nation's sovereignty and must be protected through a simple but legitimate one citizen, one vote election process. That is why I'm here today to support Bill HF 590, which we believe enhances our protection against flawed election processes and potential voter fraud. I am very proud of the work that Iowa's done today to protect the integrity of our elections. However, as a three-time poll watcher in this last election, I saw several issues to be concerned about for the process going forward. I'd like to take just a minute to share a couple of those with you. While at the polling place, I heard a voter who admitted receiving an absentee ballot at home, but came ahead to vote at the polling place where they received another ballot. On day one, after the first 20 minutes, both of us polling officials, we were forced to move to stand 25 feet away from the register counter where we remained throughout, separated by a glass wall and doorway. I couldn't see or hear anything. I wasn't sure why I was there then. I witnessed people delivering stacks of ballots, no questions asked. I witnessed voter questions regarding signature discrepancies on their absentee ballots, and poll workers had no questions regarding validation, just said, oh, no problem, it happens all the time.
That concludes your time. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Jim LaRue. I'm from Iowa City, where I practice as an attorney. Appreciate the opportunity to share my concerns that a long arc of Iowa history that binds really both parties from the inception of the state to almost the present has been with increasing opportunities for people to be a part of our political process. I would say it's a part of the soul of the state and one of those things that have made Iowa unique to other states, but held us in common as citizens. We live in troubling times right now. The good news is that democracies such as that in Iowa are inherently self-correcting. We, the people, are sovereign. Inept politicians can be replaced. Foolish policies can be changed. Disastrous mistakes can be reversed. The greater the voter participation, the more likely, the more speedily that self-corrections will be made. The present bills strike at the heart of Iowans' ability to replace inept politicians, to correct foolish policies, to reverse disastrous mistakes. They will do so, if passed, by making it more difficult for Iowans to vote. What possible question does this proposed law answer? The bill's design, the number of citizens who by their votes support the self-corrections of law and policy that Iowans need will be reduced, the opportunities. We have many compelling issues in front of us, moving from air quality to epidemic health to other compelling matters. I would urge you to use every opportunity to increase the voices that are heard in making public policy, and this bill does just the reverse. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Nathaniel Gavronski. I am a constituent advocate. I am not a registered lobbyist. I am someone who travels around the state talking to people during my 99 county tours throughout the year, many counties multiple times. I talk to thousands of Iowans every year when discussing things that they want to see accomplished, things they want to see stopped. And one thing I have not heard any of them talk about is how they're not able to vote. And if the question is that these people aren't able to vote, then they would bring this up to me because I talk to them not as a Republican or not as a Democrat, not as a Libertarian, just as an Iowan. I haven't heard much complaint about not being able to get my ballot in, but I have heard from many auditors, as you have, is that they can't get the turnaround in the post office in time. Sounds like a problem for the post office, not for us. I mean, maybe we take it to the federal level for not having a post office that works adequately for our needs. And if this legislation really would be so bad, then as my previous speaker had said, we don't have to worry about it. We'll just fix it next time. But I do believe that from the conversations I've had with people that they do want to make sure our vote has integrity. And a lot of people, not even all just the Republicans, but a lot of people had some doubts on the legitimacy of this past election. And all 50 states, to my knowledge, are addressing this issue. To not address this issue, to not bring up this legislation or these discussions would be, I believe, a mistake by the state legislature by not addressing the issues that every other state is addressing. I believe that that this legislation brings about some very serious questions, and that by pushing it through and getting it on the books and seeing how it goes will give us the ability to have a much better understanding of where the problems are, like the post office. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment side. There are no further speakers that have come to speak. So to conclude this public hearing, Representative Masher and I will each provide brief closing comments. Representative Masher, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to first of all thank everyone who came tonight to testify and all those who submitted comments online. I want everyone to know that I am reading those comments, and I know my colleagues are as well. They are important and significant, and we do care about what you have to say. So I want to start by saying that I know two things to be true. Iowans treasure their right to vote. They treasure it because it is one of those rights that we protect and defend. And it is so important that we continue to do that. I also know to be true that Iowans have not asked for these changes. I've gone door to door, I've talked to Iowans, and if you listen to the testimony tonight, you heard the majority of the folks who testify asking us to rethink this, slow down. This has been fast-tracked, and usually that occurs when the majority party decides that they want to push something through quickly without people being able to fully understand what is actually in the bill. The bill is changing, we're aware of that, and we are so glad that that is occurring. But at the same time, I don't think the public even knows right now what is and is not in the bill. And I think it's critical that they have the time to weigh in when those changes occur. And right now, that is not going to happen. This is going to be debated in the Senate on Tuesday and in the House on Wednesday. And again, those are concerns for us in light of the fact that that is a very short time frame for the public to be able to have a say. So we will be offering amendments and we will be trying to do everything we can to address some of the concerns that were mentioned tonight, because it is important to us as Democrats, Republicans, Independents, anyone in this state who cares about voting rights. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I look forward to our further discussions.
Thank you, Representative Masher. For closing comments, I want to repeat what I repeated in the subcommittee, and that this bill is about election integrity. The ultimate voter suppression is a very large swath of the electorate not having faith in our election systems. And for whatever reason, political or not, there are thousands upon thousands of Iowans that do not have faith in our election systems. Representative Masher, the fact that people are not asking for this bill, that's completely inaccurate. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Iowans have asked for this bill. My inbox is filled with hundreds of them asking for this bill. Several of them could not be here tonight, but have emailed me their concerns. I can assure you, Iowans, not all, but some Iowans do wish for this bill. As I said in subcommittee, I intend to run government like a business. And when you have a successful year of business, you don't just put it on autopilot. You don't just say, well, we're going to hope it replicates itself. You don't just say, I hope that it's going to happen again. You look at what you did wrong and what you did right, and you made improvements. I've heard lots of comments about county auditors tonight. And I believe that all 99 of our auditors absolutely have good intentions. I believe that 95% of our auditors did a very good job. But you had several that knowingly and intentionally broke the law. Doing that going forward will have consequences. Uniform election laws are critical. And just as one speaker said, how things happen in Denison should be exactly how things happen in Iowa City. There will be a good amendment to be published tomorrow morning. It addresses many concerns that were brought up tonight, such as the ability to call your county auditor and request an absentee ballot, clarifying that disabled, elderly, victims of domestic violence have extended periods of time will all be in this amendment tomorrow, amongst many others. 3 weeks, 460 hours after the amendment tomorrow, that's how much time you'll have to absentee vote. It fails miserably the common sense test to say, I can't figure out how to vote, given the half a dozen mechanisms that exist in 3 weeks or 460 hours. Absolutely fails the common sense test to say you cannot do that. Finally, I want to push back against the false narrative. This election bill is not about voter suppression. Not one single vote will be suppressed, and saying it repeatedly does not make it the case. It is really easy to vote absentee today under current law, and it will be really easy to vote absentee after this bill passes and is sent to the governor's office Wednesday night. Thank you very much. I officially adjourn the public hearing.